Everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a sequel to the 2021 book, My Heart is a Chainsaw. We will not be spoiling this book in this video because I want this to be sort of a way for people to find out about the series and see if they want to check it out for themselves. The series, of course, follows Jade Daniels, a horror-obsessed young woman who has seen every slasher film under the sun, and the first book follows her in her small town of Proof Rock, Idaho, convinced that there is a real-life slasher film going on. There are all these bodies piling up, and due to her extensive horror knowledge, she felt obligated to, put herself into the narrative, pick out all of the key players, and educate them on what they're going to need to know. This sequel picks up 4 years later after the events of the first book, as we see Jade returning to Proof Rock after a while away. Unfortunately for her, though, and everyone else in the town, she just happens to get back the exact same day that a famous serial killer escapes. And she doesn't even get off the bus before the massacre starts. So the reunion with her friends in Proof Rock is very short-lived as they find themselves in the middle of another slasher case that they need to solve. This escaped killer, Dark Mills South, is very much a true to the genre slasher. He's gigantic, extremely powerful, has a hook for a hand as his murder weapon, and he absolutely loves killing high schoolers. But Jade and her friends are not high schoolers anymore. In fact, they're sort of on the outside looking in at this thing. Not being the targets of this slasher, they sort of have a more detective role to play in this, and are sort of tracking him down to put a stop to him. There is another problem, though. While last time was during the summer, everything was fine and good, we're now in December in the middle of one of the worst blizzards that Idaho has ever seen. So not only is there a bloodthirsty serial killer loose, but the conditions outside are proving to be just as deadly. Will Jade and her friends be able to stop him? Well, I know, but you'll have to read to find out. You like Scream, you like those silly Ghostface movies. This is basically the closest thing you can get in a book, and I mean that in absolutely the best way possible. Where the first book had things going on in the background, but it really took a while to build up its setting and characters and then hit us with a wild climax. Don't Fear the Reaper, this entire book is basically that climax. It is an extremely fast-paced, suspenseful, and tense thrill ride, with of course a lot of meta commentary, which, like the Scream film, sort of uses that in a way to move the plot forward in creative and unique ways, paying homage to the vast history of the genre it belongs to, while also subverting your expectations in clever ways. Like, once we learn that this serial killer is modeling a lot of his kills after famous kills in horror movies, we get some really exciting Easter eggs that don't feel forced. They feel really meaningful and used with such great intent. As a big horror fan myself, I loved all the references to all the shitty Friday the 13th sequels, all the Halloween movies. And what I really appreciated about this one is the inclusion of a lot more modern horror movie classics. Stuff like Ready or Not, Happy Death Day, It Follows, even Get Out gotta mention. That's stuff I like to see. It really truly is a love letter to the genre, and I have no doubt that if this were a movie, it would be regarded amongst all of these. And the setting of this snowstorm, it's such a simple concept, but I found it to be so creative at just making things so much more intense. Because they can't just run from the killer anymore. If they go outside, there's a good chance they'll freeze to death. And if they do go outside, they're gonna have to deck themselves out in all this snow gear and snowmobiles. Of course, Indian Lake, though, the lake that this whole sort of trilogy is based around, makes a return, and it's completely frozen solid this time. And as fans of the first book will probably come to expect, let's just say that the slasher is not the only horror going on in Proof Rock. Not the last time around, and certainly not this time around either. Being older now, Jade is not so gung-ho about just shouting horror movie references at everything she sees, and I think her just being a bit mature, a bit more hardened after the events of the last book, led her to be an even more engaging character this time around. And I don't want to say who all of the other returning characters are, because a lot of characters died in the first book, but they were all great here as well. I love seeing the the impact that the events of the first book have had on these people, on this town, and how those changes are sort of brought out now that they're dealing with this situation. And all of these elements came together to make a really, really compelling story, which I think worked in all of the ways a great sequel should. We jump right into the action because everything has already been established, the stakes are significantly raised, and we get a lot more interesting development on characters that we already like. Now, while I really enjoyed the previous book as well as the one Jones wrote before that, The Only Good Indians, something that kept me back from really loving them was Jones's writing style, which I found to be sometimes a little bit hard to get into. It is very unique, and the way he describes events happening can sometimes be a little weird. Like, he'll use certain metaphors, sometimes he'll just drop like these big events in the middle of a paragraph where you don't really expect them to be. It's kind of hard to describe, but I know from talking to other people who have read his books, they kind of get the same feeling. And while that style is still here in Don't Fear the Reaper, I found it to be much less of a problem for me because of how just fast-paced and intense and easy to follow the story was. Like, it is a writing style that does require a lot of concentration and attention, but because of how wild the book was, like, I was fully attentive throughout the entire thing. And while parts of his previous books might have started to lose me at points, this one really didn't at all, and it made me, appreciate his style a little bit more, because like I said, it is very unique. I haven't read anything quite like what he's doing. If you've read the first book, at the end of each chapter, he would like do a little interlude thing. In the first book, it was like Jade's essays about the horror genre, and in this one, there's a different little twist to it too, which I thought to be really interesting. So I am really, really glad that this book clicked with me more, because I always saw the potential there. But I think I can safely say that this is my first 5-star read from Stephen Graham Jones, and I am extremely excited to see what he does next, which is hopefully the third book of this trilogy. Because with how things ramped up in this one, I can't even imagine what the next one is going to be like. And after a pretty wild ending, I'm very excited to see where this series goes. So those were my thoughts on this book. If you couldn't tell, highly, highly recommend this series. The first one may take a little bit to get into, to get adjusted to the style, but this, what a payoff, man. This book was absolutely fantastic. So thank you all so much for watching. You can leave any horror-related thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you all soon for a new video. Is it going to be The First Law? Is it going to be The Lord of the Rings? I haven't decided yet.